Throughout the course, we have seen that quite often the SQL programming language is the best and fastest way to create a ETL process. There are problems in that it doesn't do everything you want, and certainly it focuses mostly on internal processes with tables, views, and stored procedures. But Microsoft has included a way to combine common language runtime commands. The common language runtime is anything that would run through Microsoft's .NET framework, such as C# and VB.NET, to include calls to DLLs from your SQL stored procedures. In this video, we will take a look at how that is accomplished. I have already created a demonstration script, and like all the other files, I've placed it in my Visual Studio solution. It is right here using a static class email validator. Now, this script, if I have the feature program turned on correctly, or I should say registered correctly, I can run this code directly out of Visual Studio. But on many machines that doesn't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on the tab and go ahead and copy the full path of this file. I will then open up Management Studio and open up the file that way. Now I can go through the code. The first thing I have to do is I have to create a .NET Dll. They're often referred to as an assembly. The code that we used previously is here. Now, what I want to do is make sure I go over, create a DLL project. I do that by going up and saying, clicking on the solution and saying Add, New Project, Windows, C# and Class Library. And there, I just put my code that we have seen in previous videos. The code to work with the stored procedure is a little bit different in that we cannot return anything but an integer value. We can have input parameters and output parameters, and you can have many of those. The integer being returned is supposed to be considered a flag. Previously, the name of the flag was Boolean flag. When I copy and pasted the code, I didn't actually update this to integer because that's what the new flag is, but to tell you the truth, it only takes a second to do so. Now, I've made some changes. I need to go through and build that email validator. And at that point, what will occur is I will end up with a new DLL in the project's bin folder. Let's see, email validator, bin, debug, there's my DLL, just made. I'll copy that and put it someplace that's accessible, such as the C:\data to process folder. Okay. So with that in place, I can now go through and make sure that the ability to run common language runtime applications, or should I say stored procedures, is turned on in SQL Server's database engine. By running sbconfigure, I can go down and look for the common language runtime enabled option. There it is. Off or on is the minimum and maximum. Currently, it's configured to be on. If, on the other hand, it's configured as off, I can run this code to enable it. I can check to see if it's been enabled, and to force it to change the to make the change, I use the reconfigure option. At that point, I can verify that it has been changed, and I'm ready to move on to step 2. On my machine is currently running, so I just leave it as it is. Then, I need to go through and create a assembly. So I'll go ahead and do so. Oh, I've already created it previously, so I'm going to drop it. Uh-oh, I got to drop the valid email stored procedure, which is great because that's a nice fail-safe. Okay, now that I've dropped that, I can drop this reference. Obviously, I want to create them again, so that's what I'm going to do now. I'll focus on the tempdb, create an assembly, give it some kind of name, and then point it to my DLL. After that, I go through and make a stored procedure like normal, but in my code I have external name as an additional option here, in which case I reference the namespace, the class, and the method. Now, this method is the invalid method. It is not the one that returns an integer. It's the one that returns a Boolean value. And as such, when I try to register this, I get an error message. It must return some form of integer. Actually, that's not quite true. It can also return a nullable integer, but yeah, I guess that is true. Some kind. So what I'll do is I'm going to drop the assembly if I needed to. Go ahead and make the change, then recreate the assembly. And the reason why I have to do that is because I have to make sure that the new metadata is been updated. In other words, if I had to make an additional function, I would have to modify, and I want to modify this one, I would have to drop the assembly, re-register it to get the new version. Now, once that's done, at that point I can go ahead and create this. And notice that I'm pointing to my isValidWithInteger method, so that one works. Now I can try it out. I'll declare a variable to hold my result. I'll declare another one to hold my return code. I'll call the validate email stored procedure, which will in turn call the isValidWithInteger method inside my DLL. I will pass over the email address I want to check, and the output will be the result of that check. I'll print out the output as the output parameter and the return code here. You can see that the valid email returns a 1 and 1, whereas the invalid email returns a 0 and 0. That's because I'm using 0 and 1 to indicate whether something is valid. Now, I could just go through and use other stored procedures to read through data, and then every time it grabs a row of data, pass it over to be validated by my new validate email stored procedure. This has been an option for quite a long time in SQL Server. However, I haven't seen that many people use that feature. It's nice to know about because you may come across it. And it's certainly nice to know about because you now know that there is another option besides the scripts through PowerShell or Python or creating your own exe. Still, those remain to be the more popular choices. And just keep this one in mind for those times you might need it.